Okay, everyone, we would like to start with our meeting. Okay, there's a sign-up sheet going around. It's on this tables out here. Please make sure you sign it before you leave. Even if you're just here for a short while, we want to see that you were here. So if there's any information, we can also share that with you. Can everybody hear me? Okay, we're going to start with introductions. My name is Alana Hibbler. I'm with the Public Works Department. I'm assisting Marshall, who's the Public Works Interim Director, with the solid waste matters of the city right now.
I'm Debbie Floyd with the Solid Waste Recycling Committee here in Hendersonville, Ward 6.
I'm Bill Pace. I do what she does.
Okay, just information. We have to talk on the mic because it's being recorded so they can hear it. So I'll hold the mic and y'all just speak.
I'm Charles Lott, a member of the Solid Waste Committee.
Ward. Mayor.
Mayor.
Marshall Boyd, City of Hendersonville Public Works Department.
Mike Grogg, Solid Waste Resource Committee, Recycling Committee, Ward 2.
Andy Bolt, Alderman, Ward 4.
Excuse me.
Darrell Woodcock, Alderman, Ward 5.
Eddie Robertson, Ward 6 Alderman.
Jim Waters, Alderman, Ward 6, Liaison.
Jeff Blazak, Ward 5.
Steve Brown, Alderman, Ward 4.
Jonathan Hayes, Ward 5, Alderman.
Mary Burns, Recycling Committee, Ward 1.
Jason DeStefano, Green Village Recycling.
Lori Kate, Waste Pro.
I'm Richard Joyner with Waste Pro.
Larry Wright, Resource Authority.
Becky Caldwell with the Greater Nashville Regional Council.
Rebecca Dopp, Electronics Recycling Solutions.
Maria Valmer, Wilmot Incorporated. Gracelyn Jones, Wilmot Incorporated.
All right, did I miss anybody? I got all my steps in for today. Okay, we're going to follow the agenda as printed. There are some extra agendas on the seat on the table if you did not receive one. So we're going to start with the solid waste vendors report. We do this every committee meeting. The current vendors that we have are for trash for Waste Pro, and Pilot Recycling is Green Village. So can you all come to the podium in that order and give your report, please?
Hello? Working? Just a little update. I think everything's going about the same. The only latest issue we have is a lot of recycle cans they're using for trash cans. We're, contacting a homeowner, letting them know that they got to cover that up so we can, be able to service it. But other than that, everything's going pretty smooth.
Yes. Are there any questions?
There has been a rumor going around that you all lost a lot of employees. That's
No,
not true.
Actually, I'm about a driver and a half, a little heavy.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's good to know.
I have one in training in Memphis. All of our employees go through 3 weeks of training.
Good.
So when he leaves Memphis, he will go to Atlanta, and when he gets back, then he will go with a driver mentor for a week, so we can show him how Waste Pro does it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so
Have the number of complaints gone down?
they have gone down. In the last 2 weeks, we've got a lot of calls about missed garbage. I just got in one while ago when I was sitting in here. It's a recycle can. So once it's notified it's a recycle can, we can, contact the homeowner. I think most of them are taking some spray paint and covering it up.
Okay.
So So
Thank you.
You're
We're
welcome.
trying to make a good effort. The containers that we're picking up are marked as trash.
Right.
So that we're not out there collecting recyclables, but it may have been a situation where Republic was picking up any container that they could find. So we're just trying to clarify that so that we don't pick up anything that we're not supposed to, and then there's not any issues. So we're making a good effort for that. So that's been the biggest, probably, new issue on the rise. But otherwise, complaints are totally dropping, no employee issues.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you guys. Waste Pro has done a great job. I'm not getting any calls now. I appreciate so much how hard your crews are working. Just thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We discussed this via email, and I'm just discussed it with Marshall. Before, we had a height requirement with trash cans that could be taken, had to be taken to the curb, and now is being told that if the can is one of the larger cans, it has to be taken to the curb. So we were in a situation where we were telling people to buy larger cans because they had so much trash to help with the transition, and now we're going to have to tell them that they no longer have backdoor service because they have a larger can. So can you clarify on what we need to tell residents going forward?
Originally, the height requirement was, say, 42 inches. I can't remember off the top of my head. That was the original discussion. I think when that design was laid out by the city and previous RFPs and this one as well, basically all of the large 95 or 96 gallon containers fell above that threshold. Well, all of them that we have found, except for one model, the height falls above that. So to clarify it, we're like, why don't we just go with volume? Because when people go to Home Depot or Lowe's, they don't see a container that says X inches. They see a 64, a 96, a 32, or whatever. So I was like, is it your intent that all 95 or 96, the largest container, goes to the curb? And that was the answer that we received. So we're trying to clarify that it's the large containers, the 95, 96 gallon, they should have always been going to the curb. There wasn't anything different about that. They all crossed the height threshold. So there really shouldn't have been any change there. If anybody was buying a container, it would have needed to be under that to be backdoor all along. So it's not a real huge change. It was just it was a little bit more clear in volume versus height.
Why is the taller containers going?
The taller containers are a little bit, I think it was for the backdoor service. Initially, backdoor service, whether it was, here in Hendersonville or anywhere else, you're reaching down into the container to get the garbage out to service. So usually that is from a 32-gallon container or sometimes a 48 or a 64. Like I've been looking at some other backdoor contracts and they're all like 30-gallon or smaller for backdoor service. So I think it was for a serviceability initially when the city, did this, because this matches the last time. That portion of the RFP didn't change. So it's just that it's a little bit easier to understand as gallons, that basically the 95, 96 gallon was always above the threshold. It's just with that change to one time a week, I think some people went out and got the larger container because of that.
Yeah, that's where my fear is. They have to buy a larger can because they only have one service, and now we're being told that they have a larger can, they can't get backdoor service, so we might as well just want curb service at a cheaper rate. That's what's happening by backdoor.
And I don't know, I mean, that was no, yeah.
Backdoor to pay for backdoor service, but we're having to do curb service because we have to have a large can to hold it on trash that pays to get through one of these.
Unless they want to go with multiple containers, which we have seen.
Okay, sorry. For a moment of clarification, the mic was not over here. I'm sorry, I was listening. Mr. Alderman Woodcock was asking about the height of the can, it being a 96-gallon container, being a larger container. If that had been made clear ahead of time, we would have understood that if the bins were that big, we'd have to bring them curbside, and so backdoor service might not have been the choice if we're using bigger bins. Is that correct, Alderman McCoy?
Yes, I'm Pat Campbell, Alderman Ward 2. Yes, the 96-gallon issue, I've had a 96-gallon container for 20 years, and it's been the city's rule for 20 years to take that large can to the street. And I've always taken mine to the street, even though we've had backdoor service. And several of my neighbors, 96-gallon container, roll it out to the street. And like I said, we've been doing that I lived in my house 29 years, and I've had a can that big for 29 years. So it's always been rolled right out to the side of the street, and they towed it off.
Okay. Excuse me. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think.
Sure.
Well, that's a separate. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I guess early on I understood that the height requirements, and so I don't think, from my perspective, there was never a question. But I went and bought a big can, but I don't do backdoor service, but many of my constituents continue to do that. I don't think that's really changed for them, so maybe there was some miscommunication, but that's kind of the way I understood it from day one. Haven't had any issues. Thanks.
I used to be a cart salesman. That was my job prior to coming to Waste Pro. And basically, I had dealt with a bunch of different models, brands, vendors. I reached out to them trying to look at the height and what that was of each and every kind. Well, we came across one homeowner in the city that actually had a model that was under the threshold. And so that's when I kind of brought it to Marshall. How do we want to deal with this? And so that's when we just made an easy change to volume, because we didn't want to split hairs over quarter of an inch, eighth of an inch, or anything like that. We just wanted an easy way to communicate. So we hope that made it a little easier.
I got a couple points, questions. Number one, is there a way you guys can track how many backdoor cans are actually out of compliance, the 96-gallon or height requirement? Number two, to clarify, if there are multiple cans for backdoor service, will you take them? Because I thought we had initially said it's one can for backdoor, and if there were multiple, it goes down to the curb?
No.
Okay.
No.
And number three, can we send out a new flyer to everybody in the community advising them of the gallon limit as opposed to the height limit?
We have a door hanger that's going to go on containers, basically. So when there's an issue with collection that people are going to be, they're going to be communicated with to say, your container is above the limit. This needs to go to the curb. That way there's some communication with the resident. We want this to go to Marshall and his team for review. I'm sure he's going to communicate with, anyone, Alderman, Public Works Committee, so that everyone is aware, Solid Waste Committee here as well, so that you know that it's going out and when that happens, so that there will be some communication. We're communicating with homeowners as we take those calls, or if we have anything that we verify out in the field to make that easier. So that's kind of how we've been dealing with it now. But as far as tracking the number of people who have a 96-gallon container at the back door,
we could probably give you a count on how many people have a 96-gallon can at the back door that they don't put out, because we're going to start tagging those houses. So I'll be able to get you that count.
Okay, for the sake of time, this is one more question. If you have some more questions for Waste Pro, we'll take those down so we can get those answered, and then everybody will get that information. That's why we had you sign in for the sign-in sheet.
Just real quick, dumb question. What's the difference between two 42-gallon cans and one 96-gallon can?
nothing. It is pretty much just a serviceability. It's the reaching in and grabbing the, basically, I mean, in my opinion, I think it comes down to a workman's comp issue and reaching down into containers and lifting heavy bags that could be 30, 40 pounds versus reaching into a container that has a much lower threshold. That's how backdoor service was laid out years ago. No, it's not a volume issue or trying to urge people to, put less out.
Right.
It's just a serviceability.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do have a quick question. My next door neighbor didn't have the bottom garbage in her can picked up for 2 weeks in a row, and I said it's probably because it's yard waste, and she said, no, it's chicken. And I went over there, and the aroma would knock you down. So I called, and Elena come and got it, but, I mean, if it stinks, do you not pick it up?
No, you should pick it up.
No, because we got that.
Really?
Because we got that call, that was the same day that we had gotten, communicated with about it, but yes, Elena called us and we had somebody headed out. I'm not sure that there was any, yes, she beat us out there to it. We were headed.
Is there any reason that wouldn't be picked up?
No, as long as it's bagged, it should have been picked up.
I turned it upside down. I don't want to handle it.
Okay, so for the sake of time, any other questions, please write them down. I'll collect them at the end of the meeting, and we'll get to Waste Pro so they can answer questions. Thank you, Waste Pro.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Green Village is next.
All right, good evening. All right, so the City of Hendersonville pilot recycling data for the extension of the pilot recycling program. At our last meeting, we had a brief discussion about some weights, and I'm going to give you some weights for July and August. We're still compiling September. We'll have those available by the beginning of next week. July's recycling weight was 20,370 pounds. August's recycling weight was 16,380 pounds. The combined amount for both months was 36,750 pounds, for a total 2-month of 18 tons. There was a difference between July and August, and largely that difference, and it was a significant difference, about 4,000 pounds less in August. And we attribute that to the fact that the material in July had built up quite a bit when the last vendor had stopped collecting materials. So there was sort of a backlog of materials in July. As we move into September and October, we typically see some increases in volume just because of the nature of holidays and school and all that. So when we come back and we report the September numbers, I think we'll see a little bit more of an increase. But 36,750 pounds over 2 months and 18 tons. A 70% average participation rate from residents. Some neighborhoods, almost every container is out every week. There's a few neighborhoods where it's only used once a month by residents. There's a handful of residents that don't use it at all. We have tried our best to count those homes up, and it's a very small number of people who don't use it at all. Pretty much everybody who is in the program is trying their best to use the service. We've identified a number of contamination items. Our process does not use an automated machine or an arm to pick up the materials, so we can look into the container and identify what's in the container to ensure there's a very low amount of contamination. The goal is to make sure that everything collected is recycled, nothing is turned away. The items that we find most often in the containers, and when we talk about contamination, we're speaking of things like styrofoam, especially large styrofoam that's coming from purchases, whether it's bought on Amazon or Walmart, big white styrofoam chunks. Glass, food has been an issue, but it is becoming less of an issue because people are paying close attention, making sure that they're keeping the food out. Clothing, a lot of times we find clothes, and clothes are recyclable. We just don't recycle them. We don't pick those up. There are containers throughout the city at different businesses that accept clothing. There are different organizations that accept clothing. Toys, we do find some toys. We found baby dolls, and that's neat that people want to recycle it, and there probably are recyclable, but we don't do that. And just various household items, saw blades, swing sets, birdhouses, bird baths, window panes, shower curtains, all of the things that people think, well, I don't want to put it in the landfill, I guess I'll just throw it in the recycling container. And we understand that, and we also appreciate their effort. But what we do when we find that material is we leave a leave behind sticker or an actual flyer. This is 2 of them together. And we notate on the flyer, and we'll leave on the container, that your material has been collected, but there is material left in the container that we could not take. If it is a colossal amount of material, like one day we found about 200 metal bars left into one of the containers, we just couldn't sort that out. We left that sticker or that leave behind note that said this needs to be removed and thrown away, and then we can pick up your recycling the next time. In addition to that, we continue to make sure that there's education involved for the residents. So there is a letter that has gone out to every one of the residents on their container that outlines the process for recycling, the calendar of the dates of their collection, and the materials list. So this 3-page document has been delivered to each of the homes. If anybody has not received one and reaches out to an alderman or an official, please let us know and we'll be happy to hand deliver one of these welcome letters to a resident. In addition to that, on every container, we have placed one of 2 color-coded calendars for either the blue week or the yellow week. So to make this really, really easy, we just color-coded it so that the alternating weeks are easy to identify. We want people to understand exactly when they're collected or the materials are to be collected. So in addition to the decals and the letter, we're also available. And of course, Alana has been a huge resource in being able to help residents understand when their dates are and what materials are recyclable. There really aren't any issues to report. We don't have much of an issue with Waste Pro picking up recycling. At first, there were a couple of situations, but they've been very good about responding to our calls. We understand that there's the demand to get that material, get that garbage picked up, to get the recycling picked up. Sometimes things happen, but it certainly hasn't been anything that we would find to be an ongoing issue. The last thing I want to mention is we did some math here, and in the month of July, the average amount of material recycled per household was just over 25 pounds. So per household, average 25 pounds, based on the 20,370 pounds collected for the month. Customers embrace recycling. They enjoy the recycling. I think at least they feel like there's something actually being done with the material and it is being recycled. We provide weight and data information to Marshall and to Lana and to the city every month to verify that that material has been recycled. That's my report.
Thank you. Questions? Raise your hand.
Just a comment. I want to thank you, Jason, so much for handling the pilot these last few months, and I also want to thank you for being one of the companies, the only company that put a bid in for the opt-in. I appreciate that. Thank you for all your education that you've given us as well. Appreciate you. And Green Village.
Thank you.
Have to walk all the way over here.
You did, Rachel.
You did. Yeah. I think you started on this at the very beginning. Since the pilot program could end at the end of October, would you have a price opt-in program for that?
We already submitted that.
Do we have that? Do
Yes.
I have that?
Yes, that was submitted about a month ago, I think.
That was for the whole city, though, right? Okay, so those would be the same
Yes,
for
sir.
the pilot program if they continued. All right, thanks so much.
Meet me halfway, okay? Meet me halfway.
Ladies first.
Who was first? Come on, help me out.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My apologies.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Gentle lady.
Jason, I know we discussed the opt-in. We also discussed the possibility of using your facility as a drop-off location. Has there been any conversation with the mayor or the committee about the feasibility of doing that and having the city supplement that program?
So the answer is, yeah, there continues to be some discussion on it, and we have reached out to a number of our back-end vendors to ensure that if we were to take on that task, and it is a very monumental task. I mean, the materials movement on a daily basis with 200 to 300 vehicles coming in, all different sizes, sometimes pulling trailers, sometimes commercial box trucks, it is very difficult to predict the amount of material from one day to the next. So I would just ask for probably another week for us to actually come back and say, here's what we can or can't do. Because it is and I'm sure as Mr. Wright will talk about later, the unpredictability of the materials coming in on a daily basis, it varies. There is some seasonality to it, but one day you can have 100 cars, and I think at Resource Authority they probably have hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands at sometimes. So, but we certainly will get back with the city. It is a discussion because we have to make sure that if we're going to commit to anything to the city of Hendersonville, we can guarantee the materials are recycled. So we're not going to put any kind of an effort or even try to establish any type of program if we cannot guarantee that the materials will be recycled. And we know what we can recycle today, but we know that a lot of other things are going to be asked, such as hazardous household materials, paints, stains, mattresses, television sets, CRT tubes. These things immediately come up when you talk about a drop-off center. It doesn't matter that we say it's only these 4 or 5 different items. People are going to want to know, well, why can't I bring this? I used to bring it to my old state that I lived in, and you don't take it. So we're looking at what the different options are. Yes.
And those different options will be discussed a little later in the meeting.
Jason, thanks again for the opt-in. Your company was the only one that bid on that. So let me make sure that I understand. You have how many existing customers in Hendersonville other than the pilot?
In the Hendersonville city limits, not counting Long Hollow Pike and some of the other areas that are called Hendersonville, there's approximately 530 customers that we have, not including the pilot program.
And beginning January the 1st, what will they be paying?
We have been talking internally because of increases in costs, fuel and labor and things like that, of going from our $18 a month for 2 collections to $20. We have a lot of windshield time in between homes. They're not all in the same neighborhoods. We'd love for them to be. And that's why we're big fans of citywide.
So if the city does nothing, if we do nothing, if BOMA does nothing, those customers that are actually now participating, their price is going to go to $20
Correct.
for a 2
That is correct.
twice a month pickup. If we do the opt-in that you've offered, those customers would qualify for the lower price. Is that right?
That is
which
correct.
Which is $11.99 for a 2 pickup. So whether there's any growth at all, those customers are going to see a big reduction if BOMA accepts your bid.
Yes, they would.
Okay, that's one other
$8 a month, so
Yeah.
times 500 homes, you can do the math, that's a $4,000 cut. But
Yep.
we're committed to.
And I
we've always-
appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. One last
Yeah.
question. So the only way that recyclables go to the landfill is contamination. Is that correct?
So, I don't want to say that I'm an expert. I've only been doing this 10 years. There are people who have a lot more experience in this room, sitting to my left, that have a lot more experience. But in the 10 years we've been doing this, we have never once had a load turned away, ever. Because we ensure that the material we are collecting, we visually inspect. It costs more money for us to do that, but we are guaranteeing that if it goes into our truck, that it's going to get recycled. Now, I'm not going to tell you that somebody doesn't sneak in a piece of styrofoam and we don't see it, and that winds up getting taken out. But we have never, ever, in 120 months of doing this business, ever had a load turned away for contamination.
Jason, you mentioned earlier we have a 70% participation rate in the pilot program. Based on your experience, what would be your guess participation rate in an opt-in program for the city of Hendersonville?
That's a great question, and I can give you an exact comparison because we have an opt-in program in the city of Springfield, Tennessee, okay? Everybody who opts into the program recycles. And the reason they recycle is because they're either paying something towards that or they're committed enough to say, I want this extra container at my house. So I'm going to tell you that it's higher to some degree with the opt-in program of the individual households recycling because they've made a conscientious decision to embrace the program. Now, at the same time, that's a much smaller overall aggregate number than you would have if the entire 18,300 homes in Hendersonville had recycling available. So if you run the numbers of 18,300 homes, your diversion is way higher because you'll see between 50 and 70% participation on a grand scale.
That's what I'm asking, is compared to a full citywide program versus an opt-in.
Yeah.
You're saying 70% with the pilot program, so are we talking 30% when we look at the whole city, if we do an
no,
opt-in?
if you do the whole city, I mean, again, there are people that have greater experience than myself in this, but I'm going to say if you were to do a citywide program, we would probably see in the neighborhood of between 40 and 60% participation. I don't have a crystal ball, and please don't hold me accountable for saying it's 60%. That's why I'm saying 40%. I think you're looking at somewhere between 40 and 60%. The more education that's done, the more people recycle. The higher the cost of landfill and waste, the more people recycle. So there's a lot of other outside of things that can affect that.
Pay separate, does the participation rate increase or decrease?
If they're paying for it separately, typically it's going to be a higher participation rate because they're spending the money on it.
If you have 10 households and it's included in their tax rate, that participation rate will be 50 to 70%, whatever you just said.
Mm-hmm.
But if those same 10 households have to, on top of their tax rate, pay another $20 to be able to recycle, is that going to receive the same participation rate? Exactly.
Right.
So I guess we have to define what our goal is it to
Correct.
get as many people possible participating to reduce our trash expense.
So for example, our customers that pay Green Village Recycling right now, they always recycle because they're paying for it, right? Every one of them, they're paying for it, so they recycle. We rarely have somebody who doesn't unless they travel, but you are correct.
A couple of things, Jason. One is on the drop-off locations, and you mentioned the problems with the traffic at your location. Is a possibility of drop-off locations at other places a feasibility?
That's really up to the city because they would have to determine land, space, and use. So that's.
But is that something that if the city chose to do that, to have other locations, is that something that you would manage?
That's an HR question, and the answer would be, would we manage an off-site location that the city would own and we would operate it? I mean, we certainly can discuss it. It's just not something that we've ever been asked to do before.
Yeah. What about a problem with contamination in the drop-off location?
So interestingly enough, contamination in drop-off facilities is much higher than contamination in someone's bin. Years ago, I was talking to Larry, and he advised us to ensure that if we were opening a drop-off location, we staff it, number one, and number two, we have video cameras, and number three, we ensure that we rotate the material daily because people will bring in, and I recall I'm saying things like mattresses and deer carcasses in the fall. And I thought, well, that would be terrible. Deer carcasses. Well, when people hunt and they get everything that they want from that deer, what are they going to do? So I don't know. Sometimes that contamination can be pretty bad at a drop-off facility. When we had ours for 4 years, we were out there every single day, and we were with everybody that came through. So the contamination was lower. But sometimes people would come by on the weekends and drop stuff off.
One other question. What is the length of contract for the opt-in?
My understanding on the RFP is a 5-year, so.
Okay, and that price of $11.99 would be guaranteed for 5 years?
Again, in the RFP, there's a 2.5% annual increase based on inflation. So it would be a little different each year, but that's an inflationary value change.
Okay, but that would be the only increase in the cost?
That is correct.
Real quick, Jason, out of the 30% of the people that don't participate in the pilot program, have we received feedback on why they don't participate? Number one. And number two, this is basically for the aldermen. If you truly are interested in cleaning up the city and recycling, look at Novato Sanitary District in California. They do a dual truck system where they have one truck that does both trash and recycling on the same day. So now we're cutting the services in half using one truck, and this is down the road that we can look at this, but we got to start somewhere. So, I mean, once the people in Hendersonville get on board with this is something we can look at, but there are communities that are doing this, and they're not huge communities, so we need to push this.
Your first question?
30%.
Yeah. So it's hard for us to get the feedback, honestly, because our guys are in the route and they're pulling material, and, July and August were hot months, so, and so was September and also October. So we really don't have an opportunity to interface with the people at the homes. All we can say is that the people who have containers out there, they're using them. In particular, if we go to a home that didn't have a container out, a lot of times they're traveling, somebody just forgot to put it out, okay? But there's always people who are just not going to use recycling. They're against it. They think it's wrong. They think it doesn't work. They've heard stories about, China, about Malaysia, about it getting dumped into the ocean, and they're convinced that somehow or another 50 years of recycling effort in the industry somehow or another doesn't work. But I don't think that's everybody. I think that's just a handful of the folks that may not be using it.
Just to beat a dead horse on the opt-in, on the pilot program. So your other customers are paying, I think you said $18 to $20.
Mm-hmm.
So if the pilot continues, they'll be at the opt-in price of $11.99. Is that correct?
Well, you asked if the pilot program continues.
Yes.
So there would have to be an opt-in program that would be agreed on by the city. So if the pilot program continues, it's just the pilot program.
I got that, but if those...
Let me clarify real quick. Hold on a second. Okay, I don't know, earlier when you asked about the pilot continuing, on the bid, there were 3 citywide options. So the pilot was not included on the bid when we did that.
Okay. I got that, but if the Ballantrae people wanted to continue, they would be at the $18 or whatever? They would not.
If the city doesn't have an opt-in program, we have every intention of decaling every one of the containers with the city's approval before the month of October is over to let them know that they can contact Green Village Recycling directly.
All right. And we're 5 years away from possibly doing that at the very least, because we got a new contract. And I appreciate the fact that in the last 10 years, everything that's supposed to be recycled is, but we're in a completely different paradigm shift than what we were, correct? So I'm interested to hear what some of these other folks have to say.
And the other thing, I have to go back to this, though. Automated trucks are great, and they're very efficient, but automated trucks have a driver and a mechanical arm. When you have a driver and a mechanical arm, you cannot see what that is picking up, and that's the reason why we make sure we have 2 people, because that human interface does cut down the contamination.
Can we take a public comment from the audience?
I was kind of just going to chime in on what he had said with the automated arms, and it may be a case that those trucks that collect both are automated, so therefore the city would also have to make that transition to going curbside for everyone. So that would feed into that garbage discussion, which just food for thought, Yeah, so I just kind of wanted to chime that in. Thank you.
All right, last question, so we can go to the next thing after you. Yes, ma'am. You like to make me walk, I see.
Jason, how much would it cost to operate a drop-off center? How much would it actually cost if we, say, pick 2 days a week or 3 days a week or whatever that may be? I know you have to man it. I know you have to examine the stuff.
Yeah.
I know you have to have the equipment to handle it and haul it off. How much did it cost you when you had it open before? I mean, how much do we have to come up with as a city
When we were
to just
operating
operate that?
Yeah, when we were operating it on 3 days a week, it was costing us somewhere in the neighborhood of around $2,500 a week.
Okay.
That was 3 days a week, and those are smaller containers than what the city's going to want. If the city goes into this, I've done some studies, we put some information together. By the time you lease space and you actually have to have some trucks or you have to negotiate some way to move those large containers, it can get very expensive. You can spend $500,000 to $1 million a year. Again, Larry is a much better resource for that. Anyway, I think that really he would be a better one to be able to chime in on that. But it costs money to recycle.
I know, that's why you should have shut it down, because you couldn't afford it.
But the thing is it costs money to do waste. And waste has an additional cost for landfill tipping fees, and recycling has not, traditionally. While there may be a slight difference in the current market over a 10-year cycle, recycling has some return, at least in the reducing of the landfill tipping fees.
Okay. Thank you, Jason.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jason.
Okay, thank you.
So to address that, we will also, Zack from the city of Gallatin, he's not here. I'll give his presentation, but he does address his drop-off that they do for the city of Hendersonville. So now we'll get to Marshall, who's going to present the Public Works Department report and the Public Works Committee report.
Thanks, Alana. I'll try to keep this brief. I'm going to combine items 3 and 4 on the agenda. I'd like to just thank everyone for coming, especially the speakers and the vendors. Your attendance is greatly appreciated. Just give you an update. The trash calls are going down. As mentioned earlier, we're getting great service from Waste Pro, and therefore the calls to City Hall are decreasing, which is a great thing. We're moving forward with a house count that is updated every month. Instead of doing once a year, we're going in every month, identifying the number of houses that have been built and adding those to the overall trash list and getting that service provided. And of course, then the bill is updated accordingly. We had a workshop a few weeks ago at the library to discuss recycling. I think a lot of you were there. Just to talk about in generalities the options in the RFP and then moving forward what we want to do, but it's still, at least for myself, I'm just trying to gather as much information as we can to make an informed decision. But beyond that, I don't have anything else to add. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, thank you, Marshall. Anyone have any other questions for that? Okay, so I'm going to introduce our first speaker. This is Miss Rebecca Caldwell. She's from the Greater National Regional Council. She's the interim planning director and solid waste planning manager. So at the workshop meeting that was held at the library, a few aldermen did ask about more research, more data, comparable cities, different things in our region, that kind of thing. So a few different people in the area, including GNRC, reached out and was like, if you need information, additional help, we help municipalities, we do these things, if you would like us. So the committee got together, we were talking about it, different people on the committee were saying, whoever wants to provide information, we want them to come. So at our regular meetings, we also have guest speakers. For instance, Jason was a guest speaker. He invited us out to his establishment, and we had one of our public meetings out there. So we just invite on our meetings for people to come in the industry to come and speak and share with us. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So just so you all know a little bit about our organization, I'm going to give you a rundown on that, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background, and then we'll talk trash. About the Greater Nashville Regional Council, we are one of 9 development districts in Tennessee. We represent 13 counties and 52 cities across this area. You see the counties represented on the map. We're governed by a 93-member regional council comprised of city mayors, county executives, state legislators, appointments representing business and industry, and then other appointments representing minority populations throughout this area. Our staff is comprised of more than 80 professional staff members, and overall the mission of our organization is to assist local communities and state agencies in developing plans and programs that guide growth and development in the most desirable, efficient, and cost-effective manner while ensuring the continued long-term livability of the region. And obviously you all are part of this region. Here are some of the things that we do just as a snapshot. We have our policy and legislation group. That's more of a government affairs group. Their activities are similar to what you would see as public education, as policy, policy research. Basically, they monitor the activities with the Tennessee General Assembly and U.S. Congress, and then they also share that out to all of our communities. Our data and research group, they're more of like our analytics group. That's our group that puts together all of the data when it comes to the GIS or the mapping functions. They have some travel demand forecasting tools, land use tools, and that type thing that we use to incorporate into most anything we do. Local planning, we have a team of planners that serve as support for local communities with strategic and comprehensive planning projects, as well as local land use and zoning regulations. Aging and disability, we coordinate the delivery of services and programs which promote an environment that enhances the quality of life for our region's older population. The economic and community development piece, we're designated as the region's economic development district by the state of Tennessee U.S. Economic Development Administration. And essentially, we bring together elected community and business leaders to talk about what's going on in your community, how we can actually add to your ideas that you have now, how we can actually help you make sure that you are qualified and funding is available to you through grants throughout not only the state but the country, federal grant money. And then the Medicare counseling is part of a national network of state health insurance assistance programs that help enhance and support local programs, and basically anyone that needs Medicare information, whether you're new to the program, signing up for the program, or just have questions along the way, we have another group of our staff that takes care of those things. So we're a pretty diverse organization. We touch a little bit of everything. I always like to mention that because a lot of people have no idea who we are. And with that, community and regional planning is, as Alana said, that's where I reside. You'll see on that list solid waste planning. Some of the other things we do are regional transportation planning. I mentioned local planning services, historic preservation, and then capital improvement programs. Those are some of the other things that we do just within our planning efforts. A lot of what I like to say about these programs is, I was talking with someone it's probably been about a couple years ago now, maybe a year and a half ago. Time flies. And she said, have you ever heard of a wicked problem? I said, well, yeah, I think I picture that being a ball of yarn and it's kind of knotted up and wadded up. And what exactly do you mean? She said, well, it's official and there's something called a wicked problem and it's been around for a long time. So one of the things that we do is we attack those wicked problems as a region, as a group, and look at them, whether it's workforce housing, whether it's workforce development, whether it's solid waste, whether it's transportation. So that's the type of thing that our organization is charged with on a regional basis from the community and regional planning group. So what's the issue as far as solid waste goes? We recently did a solid waste master plan. We looked at 21 counties. And obviously, Sumner County was part of that group, as well as all of the cities involved with all of our 21 counties that we considered. In those 21 counties, we produce 2.4 million tons of residential waste every year. So on average, the national average is 4.5 pounds per person per day. And in our Middle Tennessee area, it's 6 pounds per person per day. That's a big number, and that's annually. So what was the catalyst for the conversation to even start with what is trash, what is solid waste, let's talk about this some more. Basically, we have the largest landfill in the state of Tennessee located in Rutherford County. A lot of y'all have seen it on the news, a lot of y'all have heard about it, a lot of y'all have probably talked about it. Lots of different names for it. It is filling up and it is filling up quickly. And so at 2.4 million tons, residential tons per year, 4,000 tons of that goes to Middle Point landfill every day. So at some point when that gate closes, there will be 4,000 tons of solid waste sitting at the gate, and it will need to go somewhere that day. Because as the gentleman mentioned, there was chicken in the bottom of the container for 2 weeks. Well, those trucks need to be emptied so that they can then go on to the next adventure, the next stop, or the next route, so that they can continue servicing other customers. So that's going to be a problem. It's not a problem for just Rutherford County or just the city of Murfreesboro. It's a problem for all of us. Here is a snapshot of the landfills that are located within those 21 counties. The orange outline is the 21 counties we looked at. Obviously, all 13 of our counties in the GNRC area are included. So what you see is that up on the left-hand side, the Bi-County landfill in Montgomery County is a county-owned landfill with Montgomery and Stewart County, 351,000 tons a year. Over in Benton County, it's just off the edge of the map, but because we had 432,000 tons of materials or of waste that went over there, it's called West Camden landfill. It's just on the left side of the map. The largest one in the center in Rutherford County is 1.06 million tons per year. So then you look over on the far right, you got Smith County with 123,000 tons. Down south, you've got Cedar Ridge with 339,000 tons. And what I'll tell you is this is just what those landfills accept. Now picture that map knowing that 9% of these numbers is actually generated with outside of our region. So 9% of the totals there overall actually come from counties outside of those 21 counties. 71% of what we generate goes into these landfills, but 29% of what we generate goes to landfills outside of these landfills, outside of these 5. So it's all over the map. It's going to Kentucky, it's going to Mississippi, it's going to Alabama. So we really, when you start to look at the movement of just trash, then you can equate that also to recycling. You've got similar problems with both, it's just different materials. So a year and a half, 2 years ago, we sent out a survey. We had elected officials, we had local solid waste folks, local solid waste directors that actually answered the survey. And these were some of the top concerns. Capacity of current landfills, that's not a surprise. The rising cost. There are 4 functions for solid waste management, and I'll cover those a little more in a couple of minutes. The rapid growth, the more people we bring in, the more waste that's produced or that's generated. Pollution and nuisance issues. I'm not sure if you all know about NIMBY, but not in my backyard. And there's one over there now that's called NOTE, not over there either. So we're coming up with some new ones along the way. Lack of coordination. So if you look at all of those counties and even the cities within those counties, none of our local governments do the same thing the same way. So if I move from Hendersonville to Murfreesboro, from Murfreesboro to Rutherford County, different places are doing different things, and there is no coordination on that. And so I think Jason mentioned, if you're in one area of the community, you get this, but if you're in another area of the community, you get that. So that gives public education a whole new meaning, because all of a sudden you have these folks that have been trained to do these things because of the community they came from, and all of a sudden they're confused, they're doing things they're used to doing, and they're going by their old habits based on where they lived and what they became used to. And then, of course, relationships with regulators, making sure we always do the right thing. Overall, when you look at solid waste, you're looking at a waste management hierarchy, and you're going to see that recycle is the third item there. Basically, you start with reducing what you use or reducing the amount of waste that you generate. You reuse what you can. You recycle what you can. Recover is typically a waste to energy option. And then your dispose at the dispose triangle at the bottom is your landfill. So ultimately, if you look at this, we use the least preferred for the most volume of materials that we generate. We resort to the least preferred method. Most favored, obviously, from the top down. And if you start to chip away at that, if you take 1 ton of waste and you start to chip away at that and say, okay, well, I could reduce what I used here, I could reuse these things, I could recycle that, you've got a whole lot, usually 40 to 50% left of what you might be landfilling at the bottom. Here's the integrated solid waste system I mentioned. Essentially, you have 4 functions for anything you do. You collect it, you transport it, you process it, and you dispose of it. So what you all are seeing is collecting it at the curb or collecting it at a drop-off site. It has to be transported. So it has to go from the curb to a location for either processing or landfilling, or processing to a manufacturer, or processing to someone who's actually going to purchase the recyclables that are baled. So all 4 of these things are things that you consider when you start to look at an integrated system overall. And excuse me, I made a couple of notes along the way just to help kind of support what folks have already said. At the end of our plan, as we had 4 different groups. We had our solid waste directors throughout Middle Tennessee. We had our mayor's caucus out of our Greater Nashville Regional Council. We had our industry specialists, and we also had some folks along the way that were residents and folks like you all that had questions and wanted to contribute and wanted to ask, can we be part of, how does this work, that type thing along the way. So basically, after all of those conversations and all of those meetings, we came up with recommendations for what we should do as a region overall. Consumer experience, reduce, reuse, recycle, and then an integrated systems for planning and operations are the things that we came up with category-wise. So consumer experience, I'm not going to read all of these or go through each of these with you. I will tell you that public education, which is number 2 on that list, is critical. It depends on what you're doing, what service you're providing, how you're educating the public. Public education is one of those things that is oftentimes, it is not included in budgets, or it's included in budgets on the front end and it's taken out in the back end because it's money that is assumed that can be saved. Public education I can't stress that enough. We've heard from other folks about what's contamination, what is, folks with Green Village actually hand pick through materials to make sure it's not contaminated, automated trucks that pick up containers that are closed. I have a peanut butter jar story. So you've got your peanut butter jar and it's pretty clean, and you chuck it in the blue bin feeling like you did pretty good. And about a year ago, it might not have mattered, because someone on the sort line is going to toss that in the trash and it's going to go to the landfill, but nobody's ever going to tell you it went to the landfill. And about 6 months ago, when we started to see the markets change more drastically, all of a sudden people were pulling that out along the way, sort of starting to let you know, but now entire loads are being turned away because of contamination. So basically a truck like Jason's shows up at the gate and they say, no, you have too much contamination, you can take that straight to the landfill. So when folks are actually hand-picking through it, they're getting the quality of recyclables that the processors want and that the actual end users want when they buy those materials at the end. Convenience, obviously, we took a system where we separated things at the curb and we put it all in one bin. It's a whole lot more convenient. It makes it a whole lot easier, but it also includes or increases contamination, something that we didn't always deal with before. So while we decrease the cost and we increase the efficiency, we also increase the contamination and decrease the quality. And so all of a sudden we have just standard economics there as far as supply and demand and what you're willing to tolerate and not. Uniformity, that just goes back to the conversation I had, or the points I made about communities doing the same thing or communities choosing to recycle the same types of materials. Everybody getting on the same page, so to speak. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Couple of things on here. Food and organics actually make up about 44-46% of our waste stream in general. So when you start to look at what is the one thing that could make a big difference, is that's going to be your food waste and your organics. Construction and demolition debris. Typically there have been landfills that are referred to as construction and demolition debris landfills. Those are filling up. And so what's happened is, it's because of pricing and because of distance, it's become much easier. Instead of taking construction and demolition debris further away, we now fill up our municipal solid waste landfill with construction and demolition debris because of the price being so low and the space being there and the distance being close. So now all of a sudden you're talking collection, transport, processing, you're talking all those pieces I've already mentioned. Local materials markets, there are manufacturers throughout our southeast that will buy some of our materials. They won't buy everything that we want to recycle. One of the things that we've talked about at length is if we take the opportunity now to pause, and I am not by any means saying stop recycling. What I'm saying is let's pause and take the materials that we know have maintained and rebounded fairly quickly over time, but also the things that would be easy for people to understand. Here's what quality is. In other words, cardboard, mixed paper, plastics 1 and 2, metals, including aluminum. So all of a sudden you rinse your aluminum can and you've done something. It's not your peanut butter jar, but you've rinsed your aluminum can and you've done something. Your mixed paper, you toss it in the bin together. Cardboard, pretty easy, but we've made it so easy, it's become complicated. Because a pizza box that doesn't have grease on it is recyclable. A pizza box that does have grease on it is contaminated. And I can't tell you all how many people I hear have, for lack of a better word, just flat out family arguments over what is or isn't recyclable, and it happens to be a pizza box 9 times out of 10. And unfortunately, this does become an emotional topic. People get upset about it. They get frustrated about it, and I've been around it for about 20 years. I told you I would tell you a little bit about my background. I worked with the city of Franklin for 18 years. Been in the business since then, the past couple of years, working with both GNRC and Williamson County. So I've had pretty good experience with it. Have worked with folks all over the country with certification testing and classes and that type of thing. So I've heard lots of different stories, but it's funny because regardless of where you are, some of the stories remain the same. Integrated systems, planning and operations, multi-county coordination, I will tell you now, this is an expensive industry if you plan to do it all yourself. The goal would be that we look at this as a region. Does that mean all 21 counties will jump on board and say we're in? No. I'm not naive enough to think that, but I am going to tell you that if several counties and cities get together and actually have the conversation and you start to look at our area and decide where is it that makes sense that a material recovery facility could be or should be. All of a sudden you have an economic development piece, you have a tool or a piece of infrastructure that everyone can use that's in the area. All of a sudden it's strategically located within 50 miles one way where everyone has, it's centrally located so everyone in the area has the ability to use it, but there has to be an agreement on that. So with that comes a third party similar to the Sumner County Resource Authority, but it becomes an authority of different counties who get together and say these are the things that we want to build, this is the system that we want to build. Basically you're touching on collection, which could be maintained locally, but you're also touching on transportation, processing, what you're collecting. Are you going to collect organics and yard waste and actually make compost out of it? Are you going to sell that then or use that in local projects to save that cost overall? Facility siting, obviously as a larger group, you would have the ability to strategically locate those facilities. Number one, the facilities you need, but number two, where they should be to help serve a larger number of people or a larger group of customers. And then ongoing coordination. So with that obviously comes a separate board of folks that are committed to and have the experience of this industry who are able to say, okay, ongoing coordination with each community, but also as a separate business entity so that all of a sudden the debt service is not carried locally. The next steps at the end of the plan, which was finished June 30th, we endorsed the draft recommendations, which I've just covered with you. Our board endorsed those in June. The other things were develop online resources, which is what we're currently working on. The goal is that we have an online resource where you can actually put your address in and find out where the closest location is for what material you have. Increased targeted recycling, one of those things that we talked most about was the construction and demolition debris. And then evaluate a multi-county solid waste management governance, which is what I've just described to you. So recycling, I'll go ahead and tell you that recycling is not free. I don't know how many people have told you that, but for a long time, folks in this industry said recycling's free. We said it's free. We've done ourselves a great injustice, and I'm sorry if I'm the first person to tell you it's really not free. But the goal of it was, are we doing the right thing? Yes, I think most people want to recycle. They want to do the right thing, but there is a cost to it. Now, the difference is, and Jason alluded to this, when you have a tip fee at a landfill, if you can manage your recyclables so that they cost less than what it would cost at the, as a tip fee at a landfill, then all of a sudden you are doing something. You are making a positive difference, and it's considered avoided cost versus cost of business or expense in the end. The market's changed. Sure they did. So we've all heard about China Sword and Blue Sky. Well, ultimately, we have markets in our own area in the southeast that would potentially buy some of our materials if we could get them to the quality that's expected, if we could get them to the quality that they need. There's your quality versus quantity. I have been a strong believer in if you step back and get the quality of that handful of materials, you all of a sudden will get the quantity because it's simple. Most all communities are on the same bandwagon, recycling the same materials. So if you move from one community to another, all of a sudden you don't have to change what you're doing and the whole family doesn't have to turn everything upside down to learn something new. And then it is just economics, simple supply and demand. So the city of Hendersonville, the current conditions, what I usually like to do is look at a community and say, what can I find if I were moving to this community and I knew nothing about it? What can I find about this community? And I'll look primarily at a website. Collection, you do provide residential services, and if any of this is wrong, please speak up. Curbside solid waste collection is a contracted service, obviously with Waste Pro. Curbside brush collection, you use city resources to provide that service. Yard waste collection is city resources as well. Brush drop-off is available. Disposal is the contractor's responsibility, so you expect for Waste Pro to do the disposal function. Your waste reduction, you have your pilot recycling program with Green Village. Your staff, you don't have any staff designated to solid waste functions. And then as far as the financial piece, $293 annually, which is included in the tax structure, and that comes out to be $24.42 a month per property.
That has changed.
Okay. On the website, it's that way.
Do you,
Go
do you
ahead.
want to explain the change? Does anyone want to explain the change?
It doesn't cost us $290. Well, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. Recently we changed from, okay. Recently we changed from twice a week backdoor service to once a week backdoor service and reduce our costs for that disposal service from $293 a year to what, 140?
241.
No, 140. Yeah, 140 something a year. But that does not include the tipping cost. And we've incorporated that in our total tax rate. So it's not a separate line item any longer on the tax bill.
So what I'll say is it was helpful to know what it would cost because that gave it value.
Yeah.
So when you start to talk about the cost of recycling and what I'm going to pay a month, if I don't see it separately, all of a sudden it's free. It just happens. All the magic happens at the curb. I leave my container at the curb, I go to work, and I come home and it's empty. And that's magic. It happened. But if I don't know what I paid for it, well, it is magic. If I don't know what I paid for, these folks perform magic every day. If I don't know what I've paid for it, or if I don't know what it costs, then all of a sudden it doesn't have value. So when you start to say, well, I think I'll recycle, oh my gosh, that's $18 a month. Well, I don't pay anything for garbage. And that's something that a lot of different communities have started to face as far as the financial piece. So when you start to talk about the cost and you say, oh, well, recycling's free and people are getting rich on recycling and all the, that whole story and that whole picture, if you get something free, it has a lot less value than if you pay your hard-earned dollar for it.
I want to introduce one more person that was with us.
My name is Ashby Barnes. I'm with the Tennessee Division of Solid Waste Management. I'm in the Nashville Central Office. While our duties are primarily technical assistance to county governments, we have been increasing outreach to municipal governments in the past couple of years. I'm here for a coworker who was not able to make the meeting. This is his area of operation. However, I have worked in Sumner County with RASCO before and GNRC. I've left some cards if you have any questions for the state, the Division of Solid Waste, so I can answer your questions and put you in touch with my colleague who is over this area of Tennessee. Bishop Wagner is my colleague. But feel free to email me if you've got questions. Alana will give you my business card. Thank you, and have a good evening.
So The last thing I want to draw your attention to is the page that's on your table.
Two more items on the
Real,
last.
hold on. Real quick, so we have one question.
Okay, sure.
It wasn't a question, it was a comment on the last chart. Okay, we do have a staff that is now working for solid waste, and also, it does not list that Green Village and other recyclers do recycle here in the
With their-
community without, I'm not in the pilot, and I'm an avid recycler.
So she's saying that's what.
Pays privately.
So what Mary was saying, that some of the stuff that wasn't included on the website, maybe should be included on the website, that there are local providers, even though we don't have citywide service. Private pay, correct.
So I want to draw your attention to the double-sided sheet that was left at your seat, at your table. So on one side, which is page 153, I want to preface this by saying this is typically for county governments. County governments are typically the entity that are held accountable for residential solid waste management. What I've done is, this is actually from the state's 2025 Solid Waste Materials Management Plan. And what they did was, they based their recommendations on population. Now again, this is focused on the county, but some of these things are easily considered city functions as well, especially since you all are already in the solid waste service business. So if you look at the targeted minimum, which is, this is on 153, you've got each section, population served, collection systems, disposal systems, waste reduction, recycling program includes full spectrum of fiber metals, multiple types of plastic and glass. Problem waste management, at least one mobile household hazardous waste collection event. I'm pretty sure Sumner County takes care of that every year. The BOPA collection, which is batteries, oil, paint, antifreeze, and electronics. When you get to your education and awareness, you've got a long list. So you have the adequate signage at your convenience centers, you have your handouts and your mailers. Is there anyone actually going out to the schools and having conversations with those folks at that age group? Okay. Every little bit counts.
So nothing official.
Yeah. Staff, full-time solid waste director or public works director that actually oversees the materials management department, full-time recycling coordinator, economic, financial management over on the far side, full cost accounting approach so that you actually show what it costs, where the money comes in and where the money goes. And then on the back, on 154, is your preferred level of service. This is just a guide to say, when the state looks at services overall, what they've looked at as far as a community the size of Hendersonville, again, some of these are directly and primarily county related, but some of these could easily be incorporated in some of the things you're already talking about. So I wanted to share that, and this is just a list of those categories on the screen as far as best management practices. So I've taken up a good bit of your time, minutes you'll never get back. One of the questions I've had from several of you is, so what do we do? Well, I think what you have to do is you have to look at your community, because again, every community is different. And I know that this may seem obvious, but who do you want to serve? Do you want to serve residents and businesses and industry, or just residents? Residents are that's your core group that you're going to serve anyway to start with. You've got lots of larger companies, private companies that are already servicing your businesses throughout your city. What are you going to do? Are you going to provide them garbage service at the curb, which you do? Are you going to provide them a recycling service at the curb? Maybe. Are you going to build a recycling drop-off center that just citizens of Hendersonville could use? Possibly. I've heard that. When are you going to do it? Are you going to do it now? Are you going to take time to plan it and start that a year from now? What budget will that be in? How are you going to do it? Are you going to do it with city resources? Are you going to buy trucks and hire people? Are you going to do it with contract? And if so, who's managing the contract? And then why are you going to do it? What I will tell you is anything in this industry is strictly, this industry was typically called sanitation. New York has the sanitation department because the goal of this industry is for public health. So ultimately, what your decisions are based on is protect the public health, protect the environment, and all that goes with that, which you all are well aware of because you've had those conversations. So while this may seem very basic, I put back to you, it's your community. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm not here to tell you what you should do. I'm here to tell you that when you ask yourselves these questions, I think you'll get your answers.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Sure.
Okay. Now we're going to do question and answers.
I'm holding the right distance here. You've been doing this how long? 20 years?
20 years. And we're talking about more now than ever.
I think for obvious reasons, probably. Here's a question for me. I don't know if anybody else is interested or not. So this is for me. In the 20-year period that you've been in and around this and working with it, have you, and I know you've had cities that don't have any recycling. We don't have any recycling, and I'd like to think we're a progressive city, but I'm finding out in some ways maybe we're not as progressive as we should be on stuff. Have you had...
We have some.
We have some. We do have some. Get this in a minute. But I'm struggling personally as an alderman member of where to go here and what to do. So have you had cities that struggled or know of cities that have struggled that have done maybe the minimum recycling program other than a pilot? We know the pilot, according to Jason's numbers, has been reasonably successful. That have did the minimum, and that have seen where that really works. Education has worked better. Then they have stepped up 2, 3, 4 years later and said, okay, we're going to a higher, what he was talking about maybe a while ago. I mean, that's really stepping up, but I mean, stepping past doing the minimum, whatever the minimum may be, opt-in or a location, I guess, would probably be the minimums, to full-blown service. What I've read is some across the state of Tennessee is Franklin, Bartlett, Brentwood, some, I've just been reading about some of their programs. Some of them have opt-in, some of them have curbside plus drop-off locations. I'm just kind of searching where to kind of go. And I know that's our decision, and I don't want you to make it for me. I just want to know, has there been other cities that have been at 0, went to level 1 or 2, and decided a few years later, this is really good, let's go to level 8? If that makes any sense at all.
It makes all the sense in the world. And I will, I'll tell you my city of Franklin story because it's just that. The city of Brentwood chooses to use Williamson County for services, or you can contract with a private company yourself as a homeowner. The city of Franklin, back in the late 60s, early 70s, decided they were going to be in the garbage collection business. Now, that started out a much smaller footprint than it is today, obviously. In 2009, y'all remember the economy was struggling, and we convened a group of people that said, we want to call ourselves a sustainability commission. And at the time, Mayor Moore was an alderman. He's the mayor now. And he and I talked about it because the top thing on the list for that community was, we want a curbside recycling program. And I went, wow, okay. So my budget's done. You want curbside recycling. That means more trucks, more people, more, how do you do this? So I went, essentially looked across the country. And Chicago had a program they called the Blue Bag Program. And they actually included recyclables in a blue bag, and they were mixed with the garbage. Now, there was contamination. So my version that I recommended was the blue bag version in a separate truck. So all of a sudden, we were going to use existing trucks, but we had the fleet. The city owned the fleet. We were going to use existing people and reassign people as needed. We were going to follow our regular collection routes. All of that happened. The blue bag, the key to the blue bag was, number one, it's transparent. We can use that as an educational tool. Number two, You don't have to participate. I'm not telling you it's mandatory. I'm telling you that when you buy those blue bags and you put those materials that are accepted in those blue bags and you put those next to your can, we're going to pick it up as recycling. And there was a time in that process where it would have cost more to call it recycling than it would have garbage. What did we do? We held on to it and we found another arrangement or another agreement so that we were always making sure we did the right thing with it and that we recycled it. I never expected there to be the 60% participation that happened fairly quickly. I never expected the blue bags to hold on until now. Just now are they starting to go to carts. Blue bags are not well thought of now because we know they gum up the system, they cause problems at the MRF. But if you can find a way, and what Jason has done is actually hand-picking through things, if you can find a way that you can actually indirectly touch those people each time that collection happens, then you've done something and you've made a difference. I have heard of communities that have actually gone through the containers. They were totes, so they were the smaller 18-gallon totes, and anything that wasn't supposed to be in that tote was tossed in your yard. So when you came home from work, you had a yard full of stuff that you thought was recyclable. Well, that was one way of training you because you probably weren't going to do that again. I'm not sure I recommend that. The public education campaign that we rolled out with the blue bag, and again, remember the economy was not the best, so we weren't buying new things, we weren't paying more people. We took one blue bag, we had a fold-out brochure, we had one clear bag and a blue zip tie, all of which was recyclable. And we tied that on every single rollout container in the city. Was it labor intensive? Yes. Were there still some of those hanging there 6 months later? Yes. But everybody got an option. Everybody saw it. Everybody's going to have somebody touch that cart to take it back to the house. And people questioned that. I mean, it was labor intensive, but guess what? If you didn't have a television and you didn't have a newspaper and you didn't have a computer and you didn't talk to people outside of your home much and recycling really didn't matter to you, it really wasn't on your radar, you got the message because it was right there. And I'm not going to tell you that every resident or every household got the message because there were still some of those hanging on the containers a bit later. But public education is time consuming. It takes a lot of resources, it takes a lot of effort, but when you do it on the front end and you start it simple and you give people the yeses and the nos and the bits and pieces along the way and keep something consistent for a bit of time, they really do want to do the right thing. They just got to know what the right. And I'm going to say this, and it is not meant to sound derogatory, but if you don't tell kids they are doing something wrong, they continue to do it because they don't know it's wrong. If we don't tell ourselves as grown-ups something's wrong, then we don't know it's wrong. It's the same concept. So I hope I answered your question.
Ms. Caldwell?
Yes, sir.
In terms of financially speaking, will there ever be a tipping point where it is definitely cheaper to recycle?
Yes.
And then if you had a crystal ball for this area of the country, how long?
That's a loaded question, I know. And I'm
Just-
here to hear that.
It's just a guesstimate on your part. How long do you think that would be before that happens?
I will tell you that one of the key players or pieces of our puzzle in Middle Tennessee is the Republic Services Middle Point landfill. Because right now, 4,000 tons of what we call waste goes to that landfill every single day. And as that price increases, the price of recycling is if you have our tip fee here, if you can get your truckload of whatever it is to the landfill and you're paying $75 a ton when you get there, but you can pay $40 a ton for the recycling, you've still got avoided costs there. You're not saving money, and you're not making the millions of billions of dollars people thought we were at one point, but you've got avoided costs. So all of a sudden your balance sheet is not your revenue going up, but your expenses going down. It's economics. But I will tell you that when the largest landfill in our state is full and they close the gate, they know better than anyone when that will be. That will be a tipping point. And as we start to march toward that, we will see the tipping fee rise there, and we will see recycling make more sense. It's just economics. It's the supply and demand. Sure, absolutely.
I had a quick question about C&D. We don't handle construction and demolition material, but with all of the building that's going on in Middle Tennessee, construction demolition material has just exploded. So there was a very shocking statistic about how Tennessee reports C&D material. Can you provide a little insight onto what is C&D material typically reported as in the state of Tennessee?
Are you saying with regard to recycling
Yes.
specifically?
Yes, I
Okay.
am.
I thought you might be.
Yes, I am.
So construction and demolition debris is what you can imagine. Wood, brick, concrete. Some of it's pretty heavy. Like I mentioned before, typically we've had specific landfills that were built for that purpose. What we have found at the state level, they require each county to report what their progress is toward a 25% diversion. In other words, we're committed to diverting 25% of the waste we generate in our county. We're committed to diverting 25% of it from a Class 1 landfill. And a Class 1 landfill is a municipal solid waste landfill. So the construction and demolition debris that was actually put in the construction and demolition landfill was considered recyclable. Now, that's something I'm working on. Please don't hold it against them. I hope they don't hold it against me, but we're working on it. We've looked at it and said, when we start to talk about recycling, what does that mean? And one of the things that I have committed to is let's have that conversation, because if we can pull it out and do something productive with it, then we're saving that much space in our municipal solid waste landfills. So now all of a sudden, maybe the Middle Point landfill has a little more life because it has a little more space, as does any of the other landfills we looked at.
Okay. In talking to various folks, and maybe even some of your comments, it seems that the least painful process, least painful way for us to get into it would be drop off and most effective, but I don't have any confidence that the city would be able to do that from start to finish. I don't think we're going to do that and not do it very well. Opt-in might make more sense. But based on where price for recyclables have gone and the fact that China doesn't pull them up, doesn't take it anymore, all the changes that have gone on, and we've had this conversation before, how much of this is actually ending up in a landfill, which probably goes to my next comment is it all tied in really to education of what actually can people throw away so that, or put in recycling bins so that it actually gets there.
Mm-hmm.
But even of the stuff we call recycling, if it's not cardboard, and maybe that's not even one of them, but aluminum, I mean, how much of that's really making it ultimately to some recycling entity? I mean, I know it's being dropped off at MRF centers and whatnot, but ultimately not ending up in a landfill.
You would have to look at what they're actually pulling out, what they're actually sending to a landfill, which is considered residual or contamination, because it's something that if they, so years past, we were not that focused on quality.
Right.
We were focused on quantity. And my goal has been, let's focus on quality for this very reason. Because if we can take a moment while the markets are lower than what we've experienced in the past, then we have an opportunity to train ourselves and to get ourselves educated and to get our communities educated so that we then have an opportunity to have a quality product that we can focus on quantity as the next step when the markets start to rebound. The markets will rebound. I don't know that we'll ever see them where they were before, but I will tell you that we have manufacturers throughout the Southeast that would potentially use the materials that we collect if they were clean enough, if they were the quality they expected to be able to use.
If, based on what Jason's talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but his system's pretty specific, relatively strict. Are you confident that most of that's probably ending up being recycled?
Because I haven't followed Jason's truck, I can't answer that question specifically.
I know his truck's dropping it off,
You know,
where it's supposed to,
well, and
but
I would
beyond that.
say, looking at the MRF operation, it depends on what that operator chooses to do. What I will tell you is several of those, what used to be a very quick process at a material recovery facility, which was just a very fast-paced assembly line type operation. One of the very first things they did is they slowed those lines down. So all of a sudden, you were picking slower, you were paying closer attention, and you were getting more quality on the front end.
Okay.
So that's one of the things they did operationally at MRFs across the country.
Okay.
No, we just don't use a MRF. Oh, I'm sorry, I just wanted to mention, we just don't use a MRF, so we're not, we're taking it specifically and only to a recycling processor.
And thank you.
One comment, and then I have a question, Becky. But my understanding that, for instance, Nashville, the way they do their recycling program is a city of Nashville in the suburban area, that they have as much as 30% contamination, and that's coming from them telling me that they have 30% contamination because they don't go through the precise attention to it that Jason does. But I, in my understanding, from the way Green Village and also the other service provider in Hendersonville, Earth Savers, that they do it, that the level of contamination is very low, and in most of them, virtually none of the material is going to a landfill because of the manner in which they do, as Jason has indicated, the curbside inspection of materials. The thing that I would question I have or that I would like for you to elaborate on, Becky, is the Sustainability Commission that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate on that and how it functioned? And
Sure. So what we did was, again, Mayor Moore was an alderman at the time, and he was committed to sustainability. And that's when sustainability was just very first being spoken about, whether it was energy conservation, water conservation, solid waste, recycling, that type thing. So basically, he called together a group. There were probably 250 or 300 people at the very first meeting. There were people from residents, elected officials, business folks that were local, people that were actually in the business of conservation or landscaping or recycling and otherwise. And so what we did was we talked to those people. We got feedback from pretty much everyone there. What did they foresee, or what did they see to be the biggest priority, or the thing that they wanted to see happen the most? And it was more like a survey type format. And then there is a group of people, and they continue to meet, as far as I know. I can get you the makeup of that, but it's part of their planning and sustainability department at the city of Franklin, and I want to say they meet monthly still.
how many people are on that commission?
I think there were 12, but I can double check. And it was a resident and a local, different people. It wasn't necessarily elected officials. It was people from the community that would possibly make up a Keep Sumner Beautiful, Keep Hendersonville Beautiful type committee, but this committee actually made recommendations to the board, to the elected officials.
Actually, I have
And this is similar.
a separate question about something. I have a separate question about something you said earlier, Becky. You mentioned a number of cities within the area that do recycling within the area that the GNRC oversees. Do you have the information on each of those cities, or like what kind of recycling program they had, such that if we wanted that information, we could get from you? I don't mean the details about everything, but what type of program they have, and maybe persons that we could contact concerning the success of that.
I have some of those, but I'm glad to put a complete list together for you and share.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not hard to put together, only because I'm in it.
Yeah, okay, okay.
I know.
That's all.
It's less time consuming for me than if you hunted for it.
Okay. Well, we're gonna stop questions there. If we have any more, we'll take them down, and we'll let Mr. Larry Wright with RASCO, or the Resource Authority of Sumner County, speak. He'll introduce himself. We'll talk, take questions, and then we have one more thing from the City of Gallatin.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. I know we've been here for a while, but I'm Larry Wright. I'm the manager of the Resource Authority here in Sumner County. Some of you may know the Resource Authority was formed back in the late 70s, early 80s, set up by a private act of the Tennessee State Legislature. The county landfill that was operating at the time, the late 70s, was running out of space, so the powers that be in the county started looking for other options to handle solid waste. Came up with the idea or solution to build a waste energy plant. So a waste energy plant was built, started operating in late 81, early 82, and operated for about 25 years until it was shut down in 2005 because of some new EPA guidelines pertaining to air emissions. During that time, we also, in the early 90s, we built and operated a materials recovery facility, or a MRF. It's what was referred to in the industry as a dirty MRF, meaning that we took residential garbage that was collected on garbage trucks, brought it into our processing facility, dumped it on a tipping floor, and sorted recycling materials out of that material across hand sorting lines as well as mechanical sorting lines, pulling recyclables out. What was left over from that process went back into the waste energy plant and was burned for energy. We also operated a C&D landfill, construction demolition debris landfill, up in the northern part of the county in Oak Grove. We had an ash landfill where we took the residue that was left over from the waste energy plant and put it there. And currently, we operate a transfer station there in Gallatin. When we shut down the materials recovery facility, we turned the tipping floor of the transfer station, or of that plant, into a transfer station. We operate a drop-off site for recycling there at that facility. And we also oversee post-closure and custodial care for those 3 closed landfills in the county. The transfer station currently runs approximately 500 to 600 tons a day of waste through that facility that comes in, gets loaded on bigger trucks and trailers, and then goes to a final disposal place at a landfill. We're currently using Smith County landfill for probably about 75% of the waste that we get into the facility. Some of it goes to Cedar Ridge landfill, which Becky mentioned earlier, and a small amount of it ends up at the West Camden landfill in Benton County in West Tennessee. I know this is primarily talking about recycling. We do have the drop-off site there that I mentioned. We collect glass, primarily jars and bottles. Plastics, we try to limit that to 1s and 2s. Try to keep bags out, banding material. It's primarily, we try to keep bottles, jugs, clamshell containers that you see a lot now, produce and things like that come in. Cardboard, cans, steel and aluminum cans, and also mixed paper. We've got a site there that we also collect. Becky mentioned earlier the BOPA, batteries, oil, paint, electronics. We've got a paint collection containers there, not paint, excuse me, forget about paint. Used oil. that we take used motor oil. We take batteries, electronics. We do collect, or we will take oil-based paint there all the time. There are fees associated with dumping some of those materials. Latex paint we don't take. We recommend people take that material, open the cans, put kitty litter or some other kind of drying agent in it, and then you can just throw it away in your regular trash, or we do take it for the disposal fee. Household hazardous waste was mentioned earlier. Just to let everybody in the room know here, you may have already know about this, but we are going to have a household hazardous waste collection event October the 12th, just right down the road here at Moss Wright Park in Goodlettsville, from 8 to 1 that day. October the 12th. It's on a Saturday. We'll take insecticides, pesticides, household cleaning chemicals, things like that. No paint. Please, if you talk to anybody about that, no paint will be collected or accepted that day. So anyway, that's kind of a brief rundown on what we do. Lana asked me to come and kind of present, kind of what we do. The Resource Authority, when it was formed, I mentioned the Private Act a minute ago. When it was set up, it was and is still directed by representatives from the county, City of Hendersonville, and the City of Gallatin. We've got 7 board members on our board, 3 from the county and 2 each from the cities of Hendersonville and Gallatin. I'd be willing to take questions if anybody's got any.
Does anyone have a direct question? Okay. And we're also going to talk with Larry about potential drop-off at the state.
Larry, I'm not 100% sure. Why is it that we can't get the paint handled? And we get this question all the time, if we'll accept paint. When we had our drop-off, people asked about paint all the time. And we would tell them the same thing about the kitty litter and the water-based paint and all. But what is it about paint that excludes it from, say, the solid waste, the hazardous household waste collection?
There's such an enormous amount out there that people have, and when the state did take it at one time at the HHW events, but if you had ever come to one of those, that was the primary thing that everybody brought. They would have sometimes 1, at least 2, probably 30 or 40 yard roll-off boxes full of paint. Most of it was latex paint. Latex paint primarily is a non-hazardous material. There's nothing hazardous about it like the oil-based paint. So they made the decision, because of the cost associated with collecting and processing that material through their contractor, that they wouldn't take it at the HHW events anymore, so the counties had to handle that on their own. So we took it at the Resource Authority for a while, and we're going to try, collecting it, and, we had a roll-off container that we're going to put like ground wood waste in and pour it in and let it harden or solidify over time. We got inundated with paint. And when we started that was along about the time, probably around 2008, 2009, the economy was bad. There was a lot of houses that were foreclosed on, and a lot of these people that were going in and cleaning out foreclosed houses, we were just getting covered up with paint. We just couldn't, handle it anymore with the staff that we had. So we finally had to stop that. We still take the oil base. We collect it, put it in containers. The state's HHW contractor comes by and we'll pick it up and dispose of it properly. But we had to basically tell if you've got the paint, you have to be responsible for drying it out on your own, and then you can throw the cans away as long as it's not pourable anymore.
So, and that's part of the education of the community. If I can't take it here, where can I take it? If I can't recycle plastic bags like the grocery bags, where can I take it? If the city doesn't take batteries, where do I take it? So having a platform, that's what the committee was talking about, different parts of education. So if I have these items and say I'm in curbside recycling pilot and I can't use it, where can I take glass? What other places, what other commercial places, what other locations can I take it to? So that's.
How can I reduce?
And how can I reduce what I use?
Education is a big key, and Becky alluded to that earlier. We have a drop-off site there at our transfer station. It's only open during the hours that we're operating during the week, but we're open from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday and 7 to 4 on Saturday. We don't have a staff person that's there at the drop-off site all the time. We have people that go and check it several times a day, and we do pull things out of the boxes, from time to time that shouldn't be in there, like Jason talked about earlier. Education is a big part of it. People are interested in recycling. Obviously, we've seen more and more participation at the drop-off site.
You said you do recycle glass.
Yes, ma'am.
You have glass. Colored or white, clear, what?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Years ago, they used to separate it by color.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter anymore. It can all go together. But the glass recyclers want bottles, jars only. They don't want window glass, mirrors, light bulbs. A lot of people put light bulbs in there. Jason mentioned earlier about getting loads turned away. We've never had any loads turned away ourselves that we've taken to the processing facilities, but we have had loads downgraded because of some contamination in them. And it does, actually right now, we're paying on the disposal side on solid waste a little less than $40 a ton to get rid of the waste that comes through our transfer station. Well, it costs us $40 a ton to tip the glass at the processing facility currently. It does get recycled, does get processed, but I have to pay, or we have to pay, I say me, $40 a ton to dump it there in order to have it recycled. We've taken some of ours over to the city of Gallatin to run through their glass crusher to use, but them and us both are getting so much in that they can't keep up with the amount. So we're having to go to and I think they're having to take some of theirs down there as well. It's my understanding.
They just crush it and store it right now. But I'll give that part for Gallatin in a second.
One other quick question, because this is something I read on social media all the time. Are the recycling drop-off bins there for anybody to use, or?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Anybody in the county.
There were several people that thought it was only Gallatin only.
Well, the ones at the Resource Authority are for anybody in the county. The city of Gallatin has some there as well at the Public Works Department. Alana may talk about that, but anyway.
So on the screen is the it's the recycling page of the Resource Authority information. So I think if I haven't emailed you the link, I will. But it talks about, at the top, it runs across solid waste disposal. That includes the paint and different stuff like that. It explains what and fees and what's associated. Recycling information, all the stuff that they take is here. And then contact is their address, phone number, location, such. And so that so they're like the Sumner County Solid Waste Department, because Sumner County doesn't have a solid waste. So that's what RASCO is. the Resource Authority. So, Brasco.
There is some information on there as well about the HHW event too.
Yes,
Should
and-
be at the top,
At the very top?
I think so.
Upcoming events. Okay.
Right there.
Okay. So that has the date on the events. I'll also send out, it should be coming to the city website, our city website, but it looks like this that I have in my hand. It's just a list of what's accepted, what's not accepted. It's put out there. I forgot the gentleman's name with the state. He'll be there. I talked to him, and he gave me some more information. But any questions we have, feel free from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. to go and talk and ask, just like the gentleman that was here that had to leave, Ashby Barnes. I'm sorry, I just didn't say his name. They all work together in the solid waste, and so if there are different questions about, I was asking about drop-off. Becky was talking about partnerships, city, county partnerships, private partnerships. If you have a drop-off facility, how does it operate? I was asked about a hazardous waste permanent location or temporary location, either one, and something that the state told me that I wasn't aware of. If we have a permanent location, one, our annual event goes away because it's more cost effective, but two, anyone from across the state can use our facility. So if someone comes from Knoxville with hazardous waste, they can drop it off at our location because it would be on the database that GNRC would also highlight. But if they're coming through or doing whatever, they can drop it off because the grants for the hazardous waste stuff is statewide, state funded, so state option. Let's see. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Laird before? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
In Goodnessville, I know Ball State went, I think is the Resource Authority does Ball State for pay?
We have been having it at Ball State, yes, sir.
How can we do that here? We're a little bit bigger in all those places.
Well, I tell you what, if you'd be interested in doing it in Hendersonville next year, let me know. We can
Absolutely.
talk about it, yeah.
Absolutely.
We have one event a year, and we're not opposed to having it at other places if we can find the location that's suitable for handle all the traffic flow.
Right, and that's one of the things when we talked to the state about hazardous waste. We said, it's moved to Goodlettsville this year. Is it possible that it be moved to a different city in our county every year? And that's possible as long as the location is.
Sure is. Actually, TDEC asked us to have a location identified by the end of the year this year. So if we want to talk about that and we can firm something up, that would be good.
Here's another question a question led to question. If we've got that much, we're getting more waste, is the way I understood that, or part of
Yes,
what
sir.
all of you said, which means there would be more paint waste and hazardous material type waste. Why couldn't we do two of those in the county?
Some counties are able to do 2 a year. I can't remember what.
You can choose to pay for the, so the state will offer to, I'm sorry. The state
Go
will
ahead.
offer to support one event annually. And then as a city or even as a county, you can get together and share in the cost to have an event, to have a second event each year. The city of Murfreesboro and Rutherford County do that.
Yeah.
Rutherford County covers the cost of one, and the city of Murfreesboro covers the cost of the other, or they share the cost for both. But they have 2 events every year.
I'd certainly like to see us. We got that option, put us down on the list, and we'll, for the free one. And then, I don't know that I don't know as an alderman that I would not support paying extra money every year to do one in the city of Hendersonville,
Well,
depending on
some-
what that fee would be. So if you could get those figures, or where we can get those figures at, I'd like to have that.
It depends on the volume.
Yeah.
Like you said, it depends on the volume.
And I think some of the counties that do 2 a year, they'll have one in the spring and one in the fall. Usually the way that works.
Okay, so we're on the C of number 5 for guest speakers. So Zack Wilkinson of the city of Gallatin could not be here. He did send me a report about his information. I will read this, and then I will show you. I took some pictures yesterday. I went by and talked to him and took some pictures of what their facility is. So He said when he got there in 2015, the city was already providing the drop-off facility. So basically, the drop-off facility came from the residents wanting to have a place to recycle. They talked to the city council and said, hey, we want this, and so that was put into place. So the place that they have, their existing setup consists of roll-off containers, which they collect glass, plastic, metal, cardboard, and mixed paper. The center is open 24/7, and it's unmanned. It's supervised during the day and is by the Public Works building and the engineering building. So it's open so people can come and go as they please. And I'll show you some pictures so you can see a little bit more about that. But there are people that are working the facility. There's people that are baling cardboard or looking through recyclings, doing different things. If people have questions, there's sometimes people out there for that. They generally spend at least half an hour a day sorting through contamination and cleaning up the items that are placed around the bins or put in the bins that are inappropriate. They have a roll-off truck that makes at least 6 trips to waste management once a week, or a week, sorry. It is supposed to be for residents only, but we know that commercial businesses and out-of-city residents may use it regularly as well. So the size of their bins is for the residents, so they saw their community, how big it was, the volume that was coming in, so they got the bins that accordingly. Because it's not manned, they can't really dictate who does and doesn't come in. Some residents do report other people, not people, but businesses. So if a business is coming and they can tell if a commercial company has their name on the boxes and they put it in there, they're probably going to be, smart. But so they do address some things. The glass, they process it majority in-house. They have a glass crusher, which a pulverizer, which they were awarded with a grant. They work that with someone 2 to 3 days a week processing. Approximately 1/3 of it is still in the landfill because of what sticks to labels that they can't take off, and the glass that's in the caps. So anything dangerous they can't actually touch to take it off. Plastics, they haul it to they haul it to waste management recycling facility. It's never been profitable since 2015, 2016. They pay $0 to $15 per ton if it's not contaminated. Metals is the only commodity that is reliability. Thank you. It's profitable. Okay, that's the one that makes money. Sorry, so that's the metal, and that's also a separate bin up there. So it's not single stream; it's all separate bins. The cardboard, they process it, and by processing, they bale it in-house. It takes someone every day baling all day to keep us up with the quantities that they take in. The current market is not revenue, but it's not always been that case. They have a broker that arranges for pickup of bales. They used to bale and take it. They've made different arrangements. People used to come up and pick it up, but then they weren't reliable at picking up and taking it where it's supposed to, so they just decided to take over it themselves and handle that to make sure it goes where it needs to go. They used to make a lot of money on well, this is not what he wrote. He was telling me they used to make money on cardboard, but because the ebbs and flows, it's different. But I'm going to show you a picture. I think I took a picture of that. But there's 2 places. There's a bin they put it in, and there's also a slot where they have the compactor. So they take them either way. Mixed paper, they haul that to waste management recycling facility. It has never been profitable since 2015, 2016. They pay $0 to $25 a ton if it's not contaminated. So I asked him about the pay or how much money goes into it. He said to get started, it took them labor, equipment, and the facility to place it. By equipment that's designed for the larger scale of what you will need to avoid the overage. They use the biggest things are the fuel costs and labor costs. They use people in-house. Some people switch people around to do different jobs as it is. But when they're running the compactor and the glass crusher on a regular basis, that might not be the same case. But those 2 are the costs. They at one point got $100. I'm not going to misspeak, but I wrote down a note: $100 per ton cardboard. I don't know if that's what they paid or that's what they received. Okay, that's what I assumed, but I didn't want to say that. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. So that's Gallatin. Anyone have questions about Gallatin? Do y'all want to see the pictures? Yes, ma'am.
They don't do curbside recycling.
No, Gallatin does not do curbside recycling. They do curbside trash, and that's optional, and you pay per bin for that. They have uniform bins. They pay $12 a bin. If you have 2 bins, you pay $24, and you don't have to do that. You can find your own hauler for your trash.
Oh, where did that?
Find your own hauler for. I'm not sure. Yeah, I pay $12. Just saying.
That's dangerous.
Okay. So any other questions about Gallatin drop-off facility? And I also talked with Zack about because glass can be used as backfill, crushed glass can be used as backfill in drainage projects. Right now, City of Hendersonville, we have some millings. We use that in drainage projects. Glass, because of the makeup it is when it's crushed, it can be used in different things. So we're looking into talking with Gallatin in Hendersonville. You know, we do things, you do things. Can we work together? Becky was talking about partnerships, talking, communicating. What things can we do? Gallatin has used some of their glass in some of their sidewalks. The decorative sidewalk around the new historical house, that's their engineering building. It's a beautiful picture. I took a picture, but I don't know what I did with the picture, so I apologize. But they're open to talking to us about whatever kind of recycling, diversion or anything like that. They apologize they couldn't be here this meeting.
Okay, I've got to go. We're losing a crowd pretty quick. I've got to go. We're losing a crowd pretty quick. I want to talk a minute or two, or have you all talk to me about next steps for this committee. When I spoke the other night at our Alderman meeting, we voted to extend your tenure through April, I believe. Isn't that right, Andy? But I also made the statement that we need to give you some direction on what we want from you. You've already given us recommendations. We have bids. I know Charles and I have talked about this some, of what y'all's next steps are. I asked the question earlier this evening a little bit about what other cities have done, what they're doing, why they've done, what's been their successes, been their failures. I personally still would like to have some of that information. We're not through a trash program yet, or waste program, or refuse program. We're working through it. We got a good company that's working through it with us. We're holding hands as we go through that. I don't know that the city's ready for us to throw a citywide recycle program on there, or nor I'm ready to finance one. But I think we do know we owe it to the citizens of the community. We've been doing this now for 18 months, 2 years, to get to a point that we say we're not, or we are, or we're going to do it in this fashion or this form. So I'd kind of like, I know some of Charles' feelings, and I know a little bit of yours, and I've heard you talk a little bit too. But what do you all want from us? I think I know what I would like to see to give you, but what do you want from us? Okay. Well, I think all of them.
You personally, Steve, and I'd like to say here. Hold on. Wait a minute, why am I?
No. Okay, excuse me. Remember, we need to be on the microphone to speak, okay? Because we're right here. I'm going to start here, if that's okay, and go around.
Here's what my point of view and opinion is. I've spent a big part of my life on just garbage and recycling. I've spent a year and a half coming to BOMA meetings, and I feel, I adore my aldermen, I think they're really great people. I feel disrespected. You didn't give us a mission and a guidance, but when we come to you and we give you our point of view and opinion, it's like casting pearls before swine. And I'm sorry for the religious pun, but nobody has listened to the committee. You didn't really care about the committee. When you appointed somebody, there should have been parameters put there if you wanted them. Most of us have spent a year and a half looking into the things that we thought that our neighbors wanted. We've turned over surveys. We've had the one gal from the environmental group that got a survey with over 100 responses. We did the things that we felt you asked for. You took the funding that was ultimately from our garbage fee, you cut the service in half, and then what occurred was that money went to paving, and we're left dangling with somebody's going to give us some new orders. I personally am about up to here with the alderman not respecting us. I'm sorry, but you asked. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
I agree with her. In the last month, I've had aldermen ask questions and aldermen dig into who is this Debbie Floyd? What's she all about? Am I causing problems? No. Why is an alderman asking about my personal life? Because I'm on this committee. When I found out about that, I'm doing this because I truly believe in recycling. I taught earth science for almost 30 years at Hawkins Middle School. A unit that I taught was on the environment. Recycle was part of it. And I believe in it. We made a recommendation to this board several months ago. I handed it to you. I spoke to you. You didn't even know who I was. And said we recommended curbside solid waste and recycling with that, with a new contract, and then go with recycling with that. You all changed it around. Didn't ask us why we came about this. Cost was one, and then going with once a week, the curbside, we could save money and incorporate recycling at the same time for the very same price as what we were paying, that $293 a year. You all didn't like that. You changed it from curbside to back door, which was more expensive, and no recycling. We as a committee recommended that to you. We have done due diligence on finding information, talking to people. I personally did a survey. I had over 200 people. Yes, there were some people, but it was like 80% wanted recycling. We told you all this. I feel like what I've done the past year has been for nothing. And whether, I don't know why was the money was there. We're used to paying almost $300 a year for garbage, trash. You took that, and now we're paying $144 a year, and we're not getting recycling. I don't understand the mathematics of that. If you want to pave roads, do it. We need roads. But look what the mess has caused with having a garbage one day a week and not having recycling. You were inundated with complaints because you cut our service. We're still having the same amount of price. It's just going to roads and not recycling. There would have been hardly any complaints if you had had recycling twice a month. Once people got adjusted, there would have not been this horrible mess that we went through there for about 6 or 8 weeks. I'm sorry. You all need to know this, that we as a committee, I don't know why you even want us around. If you don't listen to us, we'll give you any information, and we have. And we just want a little respect. We've never even been introduced at one of your meetings. You introduced,
I'm not the center chair, ma'am.
Yeah, I think your frustration is directed a little bit misguided, to be honest with you.
no,
Yeah, I do.
it's not misguided. It's for all of you. All 13 of you.
Let me just say that I feel like any complaints, we're preaching at the choir. I mean, we've got 12 aldermen and a mayor, and there are 2 aldermen here. So any complaints, we're preaching to the wrong people. You guys are not the ones that need to be hearing this. So I don't have any complaints, and I want you to know, Steve and Andy, that I appreciate the fact not only that you're here, but you've stayed here for 2 hours listening to what's going on. It indicates to me that you have a definite interest not only in doing what's best for our city, but also in finding some answers about recycling. So as far as what my opinion, what your question, Steve, was what do you want from the alderman? Direction is one thing, give us. I would say, and maybe you need to reform this committee in some other form, a sustainability commission, I like that idea, or something, and be sure that the people are going to do we need to be sure that the people on this committee are people that are going to come and be willing to sit and stay 2 hours at a time and work on the problems that we have to work on. Give us a specific timeline. Maybe it's 6 months, whatever, and I've told some of this to Steve, but then tell us specifically what you want to do. But you want to know which cities are doing this and how are they doing it and what has been their process, and then ask us to come back and make a report to you every month. Say, what kind of, are you doing anything? What's your progress? But make it a report with some meat to it and tell you so that we're working toward the goal to give you what you want, that we want to tell you that at the end of the 6 months or whatever the period is, that you have what you want to be able to make a decision about whether or not to recycle and how to do it in the city of Hendersonville.
Liaison. He got put on last vote. I don't remember voting on that. I remember it being discussed. Are you trying to grab this from me?
No, sir, I'm trying to, well, you won't say what you say.
I keep seeing this. Get me in the right spot, and I'll promise
No,
not to
I'm trying to
move.
get your attention. Can you repeat what you were asking? That's what I was asking. You said something about Alderman Waters. Or liaison. What was your question?
He is your liaison.
Yes.
Jim Walters is the liaison of this committee, yes.
Okay. Have you had a liaison up to this point? Okay. When your committee was formed, who appointed your committee?
The mayor is the one that had, the mayor had the aldermen select members, and that is how it got created. The way it started was Mary Burns stood at a microphone and
Okay.
and
I
asked.
know how it started.
Okay, and then what happened is we got appointed by, I guess the alderman. It never really got official, and then we started meeting, and that's where Alana come in. We've had no alderman even really attend our meetings. None.
Hold on.
Yeah, we did have Mr. Hayes came to one and listened and was.
Pat Campbell sat in for a short while.
So
That was during public work.
So a few times aldermen have attended the meeting, but not as liaison. Yes.
Here and there. We can't attend all meetings, and I think, know that we appoint committees to do things, but if we appoint a committee to do something on the front end, we never handed you a list of exactly what we wanted to see, then we made a mistake, whether that's your 2 aldermen still sitting here, all 13 of us, it was made. We've come a long way since then to this point. Okay? So I don't know where we go from that, but I think there needs to be a discussion, and I said that 2 weeks ago, that if we're going to extend your life in this committee, maybe we need to add some. Maybe we need to take some off that are tired. I don't know where you want to be at. Obviously, there's frustration. But we still have to go back and figure out what we're going to do. And I'm not ready to do that yet. I don't think anybody's ready to do that yet. So it doesn't matter what you've given me. I'm not ready to act on that.
I get that.
Okay.
I get that real clear.
But I don't necessarily, I'll just leave it there.
I do get it, and I
So
understand
I don't know what the
it.
next steps are. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Do we leave here tonight and say we're done?
If you want.
Well,
Well, I don't know that I necessarily want to do that. I don't think that's a fair thing to the citizens right now.
Well, I hear you.
okay, for time purposes, the point of today's meeting was to gather the information which Alderman asked, so we had people present the information. So more information was required, which was what cities are doing, what things. So that's the next thing we're doing. So direction-wise, we'll be talking about that for the November meeting. We'll have an outline prior to our meeting, just like as we did this time. We will send an email out to aldermen seeking any information, questions that we need to answer in addition to what we've already been asked to do. So we'll have that, the 4 things that they asked us to do this time, and then we'll also, these are the questions you asked us to figure out. We found the information. Clarifications, if we need them, that will be in there. And then anything else in addition, please call or email. I did not get any calls or emails. I called all the aldermen, and I got 2 or 3 different things to make sure it was addressed or questioned, and some people came and said their own. So that's how it was covered. Sorry?
When did you make that call?
This afternoon. Yes, sir. I work also. Yes, sir. I understand. Thank you, sir. Hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second.
Meeting.
Please repeat everything you
Okay,
said.
we need, this committee needs to meet in such a way that we can, as a committee, determine what we want to do at the November meeting.
So are you requesting that BOMA and us get together before
No,
that?
I'm not
That's what
requesting, I'm talking about this committee, I'm not talking about BOMA.
Okay, just the 6 of us.
Bowman
Okay,
doesn't
so-
need to give it to
7
us
of
right
us.
now.
Okay.
We said 2 weeks ago we would give information to the committee. We'd like them to act some more.
Correct.
If they don't want to act some more, that's fine, I understand that. I don't think Bowman needs to act at all. We've extended the life of this committee, and we want to give the committee maybe some more direction. We'd like to have questions answered. If they want more people, less people, they need some money to take a trip, go to football, do whatever they need to do. We need to know those things.
That's what the direction part I was asking from the
You get that from the committee.
That's what we were saying.
The committee needs to give that
That's-
direction. Not Alana, not Mr. Boyd, not Mr. Clary. This committee has
Yes,
did
sir.
enough research. They need to lay out what they want, and we need to tell them as a bonus what we need.
Yes, sir. What I was saying in the
I
call,
know exactly what you were saying, and I'm getting ready to leave because I'm getting upset now. So I don't need any more explanation.
well, I will explain because they weren't here, and that's part of my duties to explain stuff that was passed to me. No disrespect to anyone. BOMA, some aldermen did say, do we need to give direction to the committee? That's what I want to say. That's what they pointed out, and they asked me to say that. That's all I was saying. I'm not saying
What
for
was said
again.
2 weeks ago at our last Bowman meeting?
Yes. It was, at one point, it was whether we were going to be in existence or not.
Yes.
And then after
You
Mr.
still are.
Yes, Mr. Robertson asked Mr. Sprouse if he could come up with some kind of compromise on the dates and things like that to keep this committee going. And you did, and you asked for a report to be given to you by April, recommendations for recycling and how to go on in the next year. You wanted it before.
Budget.
No, actually, it was before the election. I believe was, I agree with you. I agree with you totally. That is
It doesn't need to be an election issue, it needs to be a budget issue.
it needs to be a budget issue, and you are absolutely
The
right.
last thing that was said is by the end Any alderman that had questions or information that would like to feed to this committee to get information on needed to do that.
Yes. And also, I believe Ms. Cunningham said that we needed to have a mission statement, and she was going to see if maybe the board could come up with a mission statement for us. Personally, I'd like for us to come up with a mission station, because I think it's all going to say the same, that we are all looking forward to getting a project started, recycling for Hendersonville, whatever, if it's opt-in, if it comes out to be, you're not going to have the money for it next year, but some kind of recycling for this community to make it a better community. I think that's all we need to say is one thing that we want to do is make it a better place.
I think we all agree on that.
Yes.
We're going to wrap up in the next 5 minutes.
We did have an original point that we were supposed to review. However, once again, we were hobbled. We were supposed to review the RFPs, am I correct? Yeah, and we never received them. We never had that opportunity, and it's a failure from the top down. But we were given an original mission that we weren't given what we needed to follow through. I personally went in and did a public records request and attended the opening bids. I did all of that kind of stuff and shared that information with the committee. It never came to me in an official way that it should have. I have avoided speaking for the committee at public comments because I felt that that was not my position. That's her position. Therefore, I didn't do it. It wasn't that I couldn't, it's that I wouldn't. But
It's whose position?
it's her position to speak for us unless the committee says to act as a committee. I'm not going to go to the microphone, but she was told to. But the rightness or wrongness of it is, I don't want us all to
You would have
quit.
had a liaison early on working with the committee.
Hold on.
If you never received the information, I don't care if it's recorded or not, Alana. If you never received the information, then your liaison should have got you that information. Now, if Mr. Waters doesn't do that, then I'll be glad to do it. Somebody needs to be your liaison that will work and get done what we've asked to do. You have worked hard. I haven't said that you haven't worked hard. I appreciate what you've done, but I feel like you've been running in sand. I mean, it's what it looks like to me. You've been running in sand because we're still not satisfied with some of the answers, and maybe the committee shouldn't have got it for us. But your direction from the front side wasn't very good. I'll admit that. Okay? But you made a statement a while ago that you shouldn't incorporate all your aldermen in. I'm leaving. Y'all have a good night.
Okay, and as a, hold on.
I'm not part of the committee, but I would second.
So did I upset you and make you angry?
You stepped over the line.
So I
Hang up on her. She was cussing.